My expectation that with enhanced electricity supply, these enterprises will expand and offer further employment opportunities to our youth. Ladies and gentlemen, in the course of the last 7 years, my government has had the opportunity to translate promises and assurances into result-orientated projects, especially as the Ghanaian people have in clear and absolute terms demanded results that will transform the country for all. One such commitment is the delivery of affordable and reliable electricity to drive our nation's industrialization agenda and position Ghana to become a net exporter of electricity in the ECOWAS region. Our national electrification rate of 88.8% is one of the highest on the continent, and the goal is to have full electricity access by the end of this year.
Right. So, Dr. Kwabena Donkor, help us understand the relocation of this part of AMERI to that part of the region. What exactly does it do to the power generation situation?
Well, it doesn't add to generation, but there is a rule for it. It stabilizes the grid. It enables GRIDCO to reduce its transmission losses, etc. Remember, in 2014, the government then decided that we needed generation in the Middle Belt. This was done in 2014. And so we worked on it 2014, 2015. Unfortunately, at the time, the major challenge was fuel. A gas pipeline had gotten to Prestea on the way to Nyenehim, but there wasn't a gas pipeline to Kumasi. And therefore, the physical relocation at the time would not have made sense without fuel. Fortunately, unfortunately, the people of Ghana decided that we should leave the scene. So there was a truncation of the process. Other than that, generation in the middle corridor would have happened earlier than it has done. So yes, there is some advantage. In fact, there is an advantage in having generation in the middle corridor. As we speak, GRIDCO owes VRA simply because the transmission losses on GRIDCO lines are higher than what has been approved by the PURC. And so when you move generation closer to a market, you limit the amount of transmission losses. So there is an economic benefit in that. It also helps stabilize the grid. You see, there is a certain balance that the grid must have. If you have a situation where, until now, we have the eastern and western corridors in terms of generation. And even then, there is a delicate balance. You cannot overgenerate from one corridor with nothing coming from the other. The grid will trip. So there's a certain, the national interconnected transmission system, there's a certain balance needed. So having generation in the central corridor will help that.
Maybe we should quickly now speak about the question of cost, and renaming can be, a lighter issue to the end. I don't know how some of your people perceive it. Now, we are told that the deputy CEO of the Volta River Authority, Engineer Edward Eko Obing Kenzo, in charge of operations, that last year or sometime thereabouts, he met with members of parliament, and he had indicated that the cost of relocating it would be around 24 or so million US. And then subsequently, he updated that by some work that had been done, it had become obvious that the cost would be 38 million instead of the 24 million US dollars. What do you say about that?
You see, it is difficult talking about the cost in abstraction. First of all, I haven't been to the site since they initiated the installation. I will have to see what the balance of plant is there. If it's just the transportation, the civil works, then I will say it's a bit on the higher side, because I have been informed that at a point the ministry wanted a private sector contractor to do the relocation at a cost lower than the 38 that is being quoted. But until you see the works, exactly what was done, it will be unprofessional. For example, the Angomaso site is not just for AMERI. Car Power has been contracted to set up some other power plant there by this government in the midst of the allegations of excess power. Then, of course, there is the expectation of future generation. I heard the minister talking about 800 megawatts generation in that corridor. It is futuristic. So if the works, especially the balance of plant, it's been oversized to meet all that, that will be another thing. But I don't have that information, so I don't want to pretend that with that information, I can say it is high or low. It is important
it's become an issue because the minority has given a hint that they intend to investigate the cost, because they have suspicions that it cannot be 38 million US dollars.
That will be perfect. You see, like I said, I don't have the details. And if an investigation will bring out the details, we must fight for value for money, irrespective of who is in power. If a forensic investigation or a technical investigation is conducted, and I will call for that.
Right.
If it's conducted and it says, yes, give or take 5-10% is within range or it's excessive, then we have a basis to hold people accountable.
Right. We know that the AMERI plant is movable, right? That's why it was able government was able to move it. So 6 of the 10 plants. Units to the Ashanti region. Did you have any such plans?
You remember in 2015 when we were being lambasted, left, right, and center of AMERI, one of the arguments in my memo to Parliament was that the AMERI plant was modular. There are 10 units of 25 megawatts each. So if there is the need to move generation, emergency to any part of the country, it can be moved. Unlike the existing plants we have, if you take the GE frame 9s, they are 110 megawatts each, 2 of them or 1 at a place. So these ones, that was one of the positive things we said about the plant when it was being negotiated. So we foresaw a situation where in the national interest, it could always be moved. Let me take the opportunity to also address this once and for all. The chairman of the Bawumia Energy Manifesto Group came out with some write-up claiming that the plant should have been purchased at $290 million and we had gone to contract it for $510 million. It is the height of naivety to put up that position. First of all, assuming without admitting that the units, if you put them together, they will cost 290 million, as he was claiming. In an emergency, there's a lead time, a long lead time. If you go and place an order with General Electric for them, there's a long lead time. Remember, this was an emergency plant. That is one. Two, the units alone, without the balance of plant, just as I was talking about, the balance of plant is another major cost item, has to be added to it. Then three, and more importantly, if you are doing a build, own, operate, and transfer, it's like work and pay. And the average Ghanaian will understand that the taxi driver, if you pick a car, you are buying a car on work and pay. And by the time you finish paying for the car or the vehicle, the cost may be double what you would have paid if you had the money to buy it outright. The Ghanaian state didn't have the money to purchase it outright. And therefore, somebody says, I am buying it with all the finance costs, with all the interest. And then when you finish paying, of course you won't pay. Anyone who has taken a mortgage knows that if a property is $80 million and you are taking a mortgage, by the time you finish paying for that property, you are likely to have paid double the signature price. So this is just simple common sense. And let me add this. This is the only plant. We've had the Tico plant in this country for over 20 years. It's never become ours. We've had Sonona Sogli and other private plants in the country longer than we've had AMERI. None of them has become ours. But through this innovative boot arrangement, the plant is now ours for 0 cedis. And so we can then decide to take it wherever we want, to the extent that we even decide that, okay, we want to even change the name.
All right. Now, hold on there. Let me go to Kwame Pianim, economist and a former head or CEO of the PURC. And you remember that he was there and he had to resign over, chairman of the PURC, he had to resign over certain disagreements. Thank you so very much once again for making time to join us. We will have you speak to us about the PURC and the developments in respect of finding the board members of the utility, and their lawyers have also written to say, well, the board members, they are not the principal officers of the ECG, and they are not in charge of the day-to-day running of the ECG, and therefore these fines slapped on them, a total of 5.9 million, is unlawful, illegal, and is void and of no legal effect. But on the relocation of AMERI, we had the Asante-Hene say that the government should be looking at it should be looking at, as it were, giving these key installations to private hands because of the inefficiencies in running them. What do you think about that?
This discussion, the discussion of what to privatize and what not to privatize,
right,
is a discussion that we as a nation have to have when we are thinking about how to reimagine government and charge government with certain responsibilities that they can easily cover from the revenue they are able to take from us. But let me address the PURC thing. I was a former chairman of the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. Let me commend the commissioners and the management of the PURC for this courageous landmark initiative. It is a timely reminder to all directors of public and state-owned institutions that it is not just a matter of being a director and going for tea and taking the fees and going away. You have fiduciary and legal responsibilities, and one day, you may be called upon to account for what you do. You see, every board has an audit and compliance committee. At every board meeting, you have to ask your compliance and audit committee whether management as a whole is in compliance with all their agreements, all the regulations that they have to abide with. And when the government has set up the cash waterfall mechanism, which means that ECG, like all companies in the world, have to pay for their raw material before they pay themselves and their allowance. That is the rule, and the directors should have been asking management, are you in compliance? And if they say they didn't know, then it means that their audit and compliance committee was not functioning properly. And I am happy that this timely reminder to directors that they have legal and judicial responsibility. And I'm hoping that the whole country will support the PURC, just as we should support the Auditor General when he also comes with his findings. And I'm sure that as we are also supporting the PURC, they themselves will also know that one day, a consumer is going to take them to court for not regulating ECG properly, so that the Dumsor, which is the power surge, are destroying his electrical equipment. And let me say that I'm happy it started with the ECG of all companies, because directors of ECG must know, and those appointing them must know, that you need responsible, competent professionals there. Why do I say that? Electricity is now the nerve end of every economy, as well as our security. If you do not have electricity, your network is not working. Those Ghanaians who are allowed to work at home cannot work if the network is not working. You go to a bank to try to withdraw money, they say our system is down. So ECG is at the nerve center, and therefore getting them to know this timely reminder of their judicial and judicial responsibility, I think it's time, and we should commend them.
Among the orders that they had made for the ECG to comply with was for payment of tariff revenue as prescribed by the cash waterfall mechanism, submission of details of all bank accounts operated by the ECG. They were talking about 61 of these accounts. PURC said it has received details of 36 out of the 61 bank accounts. When it comes to the payment in as prescribed by the cash waterfall mechanism, ECG is yet to pay the shortfalls from August 2023 to February 2024. They also asked for copies of ECG's power outage publications from the 1st of January to 2024 to date. They say that the publications submitted did not cover all incidents of planned outages. Load management timetable, they asked for a load management timetable. No document has been submitted in that regard. Now, the lawyers for the directors, they are right, are they not, when they say that is the entity that you must target and not us. And in any case, the directors are not officers of the principal officers of the company, the members of the board, they are not.
I mean, when we say officers of the company, directors are key. You know, when you are a director, people in Ghana should learn from this. I hope it's a tipping point that you don't accept to be a director if you are not prepared to do the work. And when you go there, it's not just time to go and consume tea, coffee, and take your allowance. Whenever you are taking your monthly allowance, you are signaling to the shareholders of ECG, that is Ghanaian, that you are doing the work we put you there to do. All the officers of the company are responsible. Directors are company officers, so they are responsible.
They quote section 38 of the Act, Act 5.8m, and they say it's specific there that a default on the part of a public utility in the payment of a penalty may lead to the personal liability of a principal officer of the public utility. And they say that under section 49 of the same law, a principal officer in that law means, quote, the person responsible for the day-to-day administration of the affairs of the public utility. That's why they are saying board members of the ECG are not responsible for the day-to-day administration of ECG and therefore are not principal officers within what the law is seeking. And therefore what has been done, they say it's not only unlawful, it is null and void and it's without any jurisdiction. So it's an empty paper as far as they are concerned, an empty order.
I think that let the lawyers fight over what is lawful and what is not unlawful. And this is why we have the court, I think that in the fight to make Ghana a country of law and order, this PURC move is important. Whether it is implemented or not, it signals to directors that you are officers of the company. Obeying a contract is not a day-to-day affair. Directors are responsible. Directors approve contract and then designate who should sign the contract. If you are chairman of the board of a company, you have a lot of responsibility. So for me, this discussion, this initiative, is bold and courageous on the part of PURC. I'm sure that if they had done the usual Ghanaian way, Charlie, leave it to God, somebody in power, the minister may not be happy, and this and that. Look, they've taken a bold initiative. It's a timely reminder to all of us that directors have a responsibility. And let it go to court, and let the court decide that when directors are taking decisions, it only affects the managing director. The managing director has one vote at the board level. So when you say officers, when people sue a company, they sue the officers of the company. And I've never heard in my whole life in the public sector somebody saying that the officers is just the managing director and not the directors. The directors take a critical decision and they are responsible. And I think this also will teach directors to take seriously the minutes of a company. When the minutes come and you don't agree, you say so, and it's recorded. And this one, if a director has asked at the board meeting, where is the compliance report, and management has not brought it, then the director can say, they didn't bring the compliance report, so there's no way I would have known that they were not complying with the cash waterfall mechanism. Then it will be recorded. That particular director can then be exempted from this penalty. But if directors are saying, where am I going to get the money to pay? I mean, your properties are seized or you go to jail. There's a jail. And that would be a good lesson. So when people are asked to become directors, they will say no. And also, they are sued separately and severally, which means that those directors with deeper pockets bear more responsibility. And therefore, when you are on the board with people who are not serious, who have no, what do we call it?
Business being there.
No good name to lose. No good name, no reputation to lose. You are very careful and you make sure that in the minute you say, please record me as being against this. The same way will go to Parliament one of these days, somebody is going to take parliamentarians to court for allowing, for not stepping in and processing properly the loans that are brought to Parliament for approval, and they approve them, okay? So somebody will take them to court for not doing their job.
All right.
And the only thing that will save them is that in the minutes of Parliament, they voted against it.
All right.
So I'm sure this is, it has opened a great door for Ghanaians to expect proper accountability from our board of directors.
All right, thank you very much.
Are shifting away from that. We don't want state enterprises. They are not competent. Why? Because we never hold them accountable. And people think they can appoint their nieces to boards with no competence.
All right.
If they go and misbehave and they are sued, their properties are seized, they go to debtors' prison. Next time you go home and say, I want my nephew, the whole family will say, hey, Daddy, we don't want you to go and get him jailed.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kwame Pianin is an economist and one-time chairman of the board of the PURC, and he had to resign on principle. One of the very few things you see happening in Ghana in public office, that people resign on principle. Now, let me bring Dr. Steve Manteyao in here. Let's do very briefly about this PURC fine, and then move back to the matter of the relocation of the 6 units of the AMERI plant. Dr. Steve Manteyao, thank you once again. Hello, Doc.
Yeah, Samson, thank you.
Great. Yeah, so what do you think? What do you think? The lawyers say by the law, it's principal officers of the ECG who must suffer the penalty. And you are slapping it on the individual board members who are not principal officers.
Samson, I think this matter can best be settled in a court of law. But for me, what has played out in the public space between the utilities regulator and ECG, and also between ECG and Gridco, is very unfortunate. This is because it has the potential of degenerating into bad blood and could eventually undermine industrial harmony and cooperation among the players. Now, unfortunate again because it is avoidable. You see, as a regulator, the PURC does not only seek to enforce compliance with the rules of the industry, but also it exists to resolve disputes among players when they occur. So rather than flex its muscles openly, I believe the PURC could have adopted a different approach and created a forum for all the players, including the Ministry of Finance, because it is very critical to this discussion. And I doff my hat to the Committee of Parliament, the Mines and Energy, and the approach they adopted in getting to the bottom of this matter, which settled the argument as to whether we are in Dumsor or not. That's what you do. You bring all the players into one room, and then you actually argue your differences behind the scenes, and it is only when you come to some accommodation, some conclusion, that you go public. And so for PURC to be seen as adjudicating openly and in public, for me, begs some questions. Because look, PURC has been in existence now, time and again argue that this entity has been sleeping on the job. Look, there have been instances when there have been unexplained outages. And then you have Gridco, ECG issuing contradictory statements, and you don't hear from the PURC. But I believe that it is not for the entities to tell us. It is for the regulator to investigate and then come out as the arbiter to tell consumers why we have to sleep in darkness. But oftentimes you don't see them. In fact, the PURC is visible only when it comes to tariff fixing. So of course, I'm happy they are now beginning to assert themselves. But I think that the approach needs to be looked at so that we avoid acrimony and make everybody comfortable and able to deliver on their mandate.
But is it fair? For example, you say that they have 61 bank accounts, you want a consolidation of these. You ask that they should bring details of all the bank accounts that they operate. Now you say they have brought 36 out of the 61. They are saying that they have asked their bankers to make this available. Why should they be blamed for it not being submitted at the time you want it? You have asked for load management timetable. Of course, that one they have not submitted yet. But they have explained why they cannot have a load management timetable. Is it fair? Is it fair to fine them?
Yes.
Yeah, and that is why I make the point that these things could have been resolved behind the scenes. Look, I know the proper procedure for obtaining bank information is to draft a letter to the banks, and that the principals will sign, and the bank will release the information to whoever needs it. If there is a delay, you find out why there's a delay. You don't go public chastising the entity for not making the accounts available. So I think that a lot of this drama we are seeing could have been avoided if the PRC adopted a better approach.
All right. Kwenka, so you are the lawyer here, reading from the law as especially having been assisted in the manner in which that the lawyers for the board, members of the board have done. Do you think that they have directed the fines at the wrong place?
Well, first of all, let me put things in perspective. And Samson, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thanks to your cherished viewers. First of all, I think I agree with Boafo and Co. Totally. They are right in their approach. You see, some of the determinations they made are supposed to be made by courts or the High Court. Some of the determinations that have been made by the PURC are supposed to be determinations made by a court. For example, you will see, I mean, we are not in a law lecture, but you will see that even though there's a problem with some spelling I've seen in that letter, the veil of incorporation, for example, yeah, you've seen that. Instead of VE, there's a VA, which
a couple of typos in there,
is repeated in the letter. The veil of incorporation, there are circumstances under which it is lifted. And we know that that is done mostly by the courts. When the courts realize that you are using it as a cloak to perpetrate maybe fraud or...
Moko versus Kuma.
I mean, Moko versus Kuma is very clear on that. And so it's a very strict principle which is applicable by the courts. So the lawyer's statement was very clear, whether they have the mandate to act as a court. If they don't have the mandate to act as a court and go ahead to lift the veil of incorporation and etc., then they lack jurisdiction to do what they did. And simplicity, whatever they did, they concluded that was null, void,
but
and of no effect.
Our laws generally give such entities a bit of adjudicatory powers.
Absolutely.
So they are right to take the decision, and if you disagree, you go for judicial review.
No, you see, so first of all, you have to put it in perspective. If you read LI 2413, okay, and Act 538, there are very specific provisions dealing with how to exact penal consequences for acts committed by entities. The question fundamentally is the act of the PURC in exacting the fine. Do they comply with LI 2413 and the provisions
From where you
of...
say it, what's the verdict?
It doesn't. There's a shortfall. And that's where I was coming to actually look at it. Because if you look at LI 2413 and you look at Act 538 and the specific provisions that have been quoted, it is very clear that those determinations are made by the courts after, I mean, the issue has been brought before them, and they realize that the conduct of the principal officers or officers of the company are such that we should attach personal responsibility at them. So they then go ahead and lift the veil of incorporation and find them as culprits and exact penal consequences on them.
But
at this particular stage,
substantially,
even again,
it's not that they are not. It's not that they are. But that they are.
They are even saying that they are even not officers. When strictly speaking, board of directors. If you look at our Companies Act, they are not principal officers of the company. You talk about principal officers, you're talking about the managing director, deputy, then those who manage the day-to-day affairs of the. Take it that the board provides direction, policy direction for the company. The day-to-day management of a company is not done by the board. That's why when you go to the entity, you will not find an office, board chairman's office, board secretary's office, and etc. But you find the MD's office, the deputy MD's office. So the day-to-day affairs are being managed by the officers of the company. And strictly speaking, that is also defined by the law. It does not include the board members. So that is why they are saying that they lacked jurisdiction in even, and you know that in law, if you lack jurisdiction in taking a decision, you do take it, it's a nullity.
So from where you say this is going nowhere?
I think that, but I heard Dr. Steve Mantiel say something, and I would want to agree with him to some extent, that the courts should come in and make a determination on the matter. Because clearly, you realize that PURC is asserting that what they said was right. And then the response from the lawyers also state clearly that what they said was not right. And then they have cited the specific provisions of the law that have been flouted. So for us to get a determination that will satisfy all parties, then it has to be determined by a court in this particular case. But clearly from where I sit, I think that the PURC got it wrong, especially looking at the basic provisions of the law in LI 2413 and the provisions of the law in Act 538. It is very clear that their act, they were virtually acting as a high court.
Imagine that eventually they have to pay the fines. The fines will not bring the load management timetable that they sought, for which they say have not been supplied. The ECG have been explaining why there will not be a load management timetable.
Please. ECG has brought this problem onto itself partly. ECG has behaved more political than as a commercial entity. Some of the pronouncements of ECG's bosses have frayed into the political arena, and that is part of the problem. And I disagree. You see, if you look at our governance structure, maybe we have conflicts of laws. If you look at our governance structure, a key governance structure today is audit and compliance. Who complies with regulatory directives? It's the board's responsibility. As to whether the letter of the law or the framing of the law is defective in terms of today's reality, that's another business, that the law can be improved upon. But in terms of modern corporate governance, it is always critical to have an audit and compliance subcommittee of the board.
Board members are not the ones who run the day-to-day affairs of the company.
But they have responsibility. You see, there is...
They can give the directions to those who are running, the managers, the secretaries.
Who hires the managing director? It's the board. Let's not pretend otherwise. The board hires all management. And ECG, let's also be careful to appreciate that.
They don't manage
ECG, unlike VRA and unlike some other, are registered as limited liability companies by the Ghanaian state, consciously so. And so the best principles of corporate commercial governance are applicable to ECG. As to whether in the LI 2413, as to whether it's too limiting and that PURC finds itself under the strictures, it's another thing for the course. Okay. I'm not a lawyer. But in recognition of developing dynamic corporate governance, we must make it clear that the board has responsibility. As to whether...
And you are excited, like many others,
I am very
about
excited.
What the PURC is doing, asserting its authority.
Yes, the laws, a court may shoot it down for lack of jurisdiction.
Yes.
That a court may do that.
Yes.
But the principle, and that should inform Parliament.
What's the point you wanted to make?
You see, the basic principle, which we haven't stated, we should state it. The basic principle of company law is that the company is a different entity from the managers. That is the basic principle. So when you are attaching responsibility to the company, because it's a separate legal entity, when anything happens, the only time you can attach responsibility to the officers of the company is when the veil of incorporation is lifted. And I'm saying that that is normally done when the matter is before a court and the court finds by evidence that indeed at this particular point the veil of incorporation ought to be lifted and we attach responsibility on the basis of the conduct of parties. Until that is effectively done, you cannot sit in your office and write a letter lifting the veil of incorporation.
All right.
Do so.
Let's get back to this.
992, the Companies Code makes room for lifting the veil.
Yes.
It's a question of procedure.
All right. Now, let's get back to this. And Dr. Steve Manteau, when the matter of relocating the AMERI power plants to the Ashanti region came up, we had advocacy, including from the African Center for Energy Policy, ACEP, that the relocation of the plant to Kumasi would worsen the power situation, and also that the cost of $25.48 million to $35.6 million was bloated. Now it's been done.
Samson, before I go on to your question, because we spoke earlier, your panelists spoke earlier about corporate governance, I would want to draw attention to how we've allowed politicians in this country to bastardize the principles of good corporate governance. One of your panelists alluded to the fact that it is the board's responsibility to appoint the manager. Under our current political dispensation, we have had instances where almost all the heads, the managing directors of all the state-owned enterprises have been appointed by the president. Okay? Again, we have had instances where even junior officers, go to Ghana Gas, okay? We have junior officers who were appointed from the presidency. And that undermines good corporate governance. Okay? Properly speaking, and I agree with Lawyer Kenkap, it is the president's responsibility as representative of the owners of the entity to appoint the boards. And then the boards will appoint the managing director, and then the managing director appoints the other management staff. When you do that, then reporting responsibilities will be from management to managing director to the board, board to the president. Again, the reason our state-owned enterprises don't seem to be doing very well is because we have a public services commission, which has the mandate to recruit personnel for public enterprises and the civil service. Now, when a position becomes vacant, the proper procedure is to have that vacancy advertised. And then you go through a competitive process to select the most competent person to hold the job. But these days, what we see is that the person gets appointed by the president, and then he's asked to go through the process of regularizing the appointment through the Public Services Commission. That is a misnomer, because then it does not allow that competitive process for selection of people to run our state entities.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it's how come we have many square pegs in round holes in this country.
Right.
So if we're talking about corporate governance, we need to acknowledge it the way it is and then try to resolve it. We need to insulate these appointments from the powers and interference from the presidency. Now, going back to the relocation.
ASAP was saying that the best thing, looking at the debt situation of the sector, this was not the best decision, and that the best decision, instead of relocating, was for the Energy Ministry to prioritize strengthening the transmission systems in place to coincide with a stable power supply for the middle belt from Bui Dam Additionally, the issue of cost, about 25 to 36, million US dollars. They said that was over bloated.
Well, I think we need to separate the issues. And I sincerely believe that there are good reasons for relocating AMERI. And I think Dr. Kwabena, my good friend, we haven't seen each other in a long while. He actually enumerated some of them. The issues about technical losses, that's transmission losses, but also about the need to stabilize the power. And if you have to do that on their own without relocating AMERI, that is going to cost some money. And I wonder if that will even be very efficiently done. But beyond that, I've always been uncomfortable with the situation where all our thermal generation plants are sited in the southern part of the country. Should anything happen, we'll be in serious jeopardy as a country. So it makes sense to spread your generation plants across the country so that in the event of any catastrophe, you don't plunge the entire country into darkness. So there are good reasons. With the cost dimensions, you need a benchmark to be able to say that this is too high or too low. I do not have that benchmark because I have no evidence of similar assignment being undertaken under the circumstances in which this was done. So I would avoid commenting on the cost, but to say that there were good reasons for the relocation. And again, let me say that my particular worry about the relocation was the fanfare around it. I thought it was completely unnecessary. And I would expect that this fanfare would have come at a huge cost to the taxpayer. You have a state-owned enterprise, and it's a commercial entity, and it does this work for which people are paid. So why should there be a political fanfare just because BRA has relocated a plant to Kumasi? It's an exercise in mediocrity, and we should stop these things. They are wasteful expenditures. And that is a concern I have. And you see that at the end of the day, all I've said points to a certain interference, over involvement of the political establishment in the business of state-owned enterprises. And that is where the problem is. And that is why we have inefficiency at the ECG. And, let me bring in the fact that just days ago, the general manager of Ashanti region east of the ECG had to be arrested. For what crime? For authorizing the disconnection of an entity that owed electricity bills. So how else do you expect ECG to finance its operations and improve the services if you would not allow it to collect monies owed to it? So these are issues. The political interference is too much. And that is why oftentimes we would then say, let's privatize.
But Doc, public officers, including the police service, must give an indication that they are professionals. Is it because a minister is the one who called them to arrest? That's why they effected the arrest. If it was anybody who called them to say, go arrest the ECG, whoever, because they have gone to disconnect somebody, would they have done it? What is the crime that was committed for anybody to be arrested in the first place? And this is such a mockery, and it continues. So, but the question is, there's been questions about whether this particular government has the moral, as it were, right to even be celebrating this in the manner they are doing, given how they bastardized AMERI, compelling the then president to get PURC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, to conduct an audit into the AMERI situation, and the results came, and it showed that all the claims of, corruption were unfounded.
You see, Samson, let's avoid politicizing this discussion. Because once you go on that trajectory, then it becomes a political give and take between NDC and MPP. And therefore, we are not able to address the issues the way it ought to be addressed. Whatever it is, AMERI now is the property of the Republic of Ghana. It has to be relocated, and it's been relocated by a corporate entity. Politicians should have nothing to do with it. That's my position.
What do you recall to be the role of the said miscellaneous in the sacking or in the exit of Mr. Ejako from office?
Well, it all has to do with suspicion of corruption, overpricing of the relocation and all that. But you see, I want us to avoid...
The question is being asked again, because these are important questions. That this was sole sourced, and sole sourced to an entity that there are suspicions around.
Yeah, you see, Samson, is sole sourcing permitted under our law?
Certainly it is.
Under what circumstances can we do sole sourcing? Those are the questions we should ask. Were the rules followed? If the rules were followed, fine. There is no issue.
They would have been qualified on the basis of the expertise.
Sorry?
I said they would have been qualified on the basis of the expertise.
Yes. On technical expertise, there are clear financial and technical criteria for the selection. And so the question should be as to whether these were followed or not. I want to avoid speculation and reading meanings into things that I do not have evidence to support.
All right. Thank you.
Something
yes,
very quickly, you would realize that your panelists are at idiom on this matter on the relocation. There is no disputation about the reasons for the relocation.
I put that question first to Dr. Komrado.
And I wanted to even come to that, to commend him for that high level of professional assessment that he made. Very few.
It's always been like that.
Very few people will do such. And I think that, I mean, he's been an elderly friend on the floor and etc. And I have to say that he looked at it from a professional eye and gave that assessment. So, you see, technical persons would have advised the ECG or the presidency as to the relocation of this particular plant. And these technical pieces of advice, when given, are complied with. And so, if you look at the reasons that were actually given by the Venerable Komrado Nko, he stated it. I mean, about transmission losses being minimized, satisfaction of generation, proximity, and etc., which are all advantageous for the relocation to be done. The politics of it that you actually tried to bring in, you see, I want us to, as Dr. Stephen Mantio has said, we should try and stay away from it, because the AMERI, the renaming and etc., you know very well that AMERI itself is a company, a foreign entity. And so now that it has become our own, we cannot maintain the name. We just have to find another name for it, because we can maintain it fine.
Or is it
but
that
I think that
somebody is just ashamed?
No,
that they have tried so hard to demonize over this plan, and now it is the same thing you are taking to court.
No. Samson Ladi Ayenini Company Limited goes to acquire a particular property for and on behalf of Ghana on the basis of build, operate, and transfer. And then you have exhausted your tenure. For 10 years, you were supposed to operate the entity and hand over. You've exhausted that. You've now handed it over to government of Ghana. It's no longer your property. Why should the name remain Samson Ladi Ayenini Company Limited?
Is that not a good point? Is that not a good point? Is there no precedent that when we are doing such plans, we'll say the Takra Day, Abuaze Days, is it voter? There's one there. We call it by the name of the place. Is that not normal?
No, I have stated that I don't have a problem with the naming. The problem I have is that to the uninformed, it looks that government has constructed a new plant. And therefore, VRA...
We're getting to elections.
Yeah, VRA in its earlier communication ought to have said, this is the AMERI plant that we are relocating to Kumasi and rechristening as K1 thermal power plant. If that had been done, half of the brouhaha would not even have been there.
Okay.
So when you create the impression that it is a new In fact, there's no need for
Sometimes we also remember that if the contractual obligation of government of Ghana hadn't been fulfilled,
exactly.
I mean, the plant would not have been
the one that inherited would have taken care of.
Exactly.
And this is where we draw the curtains on these
Yes.
two twin issues of the relocation of the AMERI and the slapping of the fine on the board members of the ECG for non-compliance fully, satisfactorily, of the orders that were made by the PURC to the ECG. My guests have been Dr. Steve Manteyao, Chairman, Coalition of Stakeholders in Electricity Contracts and Arrangements, COSECA. Dr. Kwabena Donkor is MP Pro East and former Minister for Power. Joseph Dindiok Pemka is former Deputy Attorney General and Deputy Minister for Justice and former MP Timpani. We also were joined by Kwame Pianim, economist and former chairman of the PURC, who, like I said, very rarely happens, resigned on matter of principle. We'll take a quick break. When we return, we'll try and canvass the second issue for you very briefly about EOCO clearing the Rose Ministry of corruption allegations leveled against it by the venerable Professor Stephen Adey. And Maslock, two jailed, former heads of the institution, jailed for thievery. That's what we should call, not corruption, thievery. It's stealing, which is still going on. And some people are saying, are now cautioning others, be careful when you are caught. You are stealing, you have not been caught, and you think you get away all the time. We'll be right back.